This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey YouTubers, this is Jacques, and today we're going to be talking about how to get that blurry background in the back. A lot of people call this the Bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. Bokeh is the name. Now there's really only two ways you can get this, and right off the bat I'm going to tell you how to do that in this video, and we're going to talk about different challenges you can have when you are getting bokeh. Stay tuned. So before we start, I just want to tell you that we'll be using the images from the photo shoot I had with Laurence. I, at that time, used the Fujifilm X-T4 and the Fujinon 50mm f1. Now, for any of those people who are out there who are wondering how to get bokeh and they have a cell phone, it's okay that you don't know what I'm talking about. That's fine, because we're going to talk about you guys right off the bat. Now, the only way you can really get bokeh, if you are a person who photographs maybe for social media and you use a telephone, is probably through the actual app on your phone. Now, if you do own an iPhone or you own a relatively new Android phone, you will have a setting on your phone called Portrait. Now, what that application does is gives you what you'd probably get if you had a professional camera. So what it does is it isolates the person themselves, and then after that goes to the background and makes that background blurry by applying a blurry effect on the background of that image for the portrait. So that's how you get it done within your cell phone. So I advise anyone who does have a cell phone, like an iPhone 10, you will have the ability to go into a mode called portrait. Play with that mode and try to do a couple selfies with it. You have to do a couple of settings in it, and you got to get used to it, but it will apply a pretty darn good effect of you having the subject in focus and the background being blurry. So that's how you do it on a phone. Now, if you are using a camera, things change. One thing is for sure, you get a more convincing bokeh look like the image you're looking at right now. And it's more natural, and it's something that can be really, really nice. This rule applies to anybody who has a actual camera to take your shots. Now, I will be referring you guys to a blog post I have on my website. It's all about f-stop, because that's what we're going to be learning today. Now, there's three settings everyone has on any camera you own. One of them is aperture. That is the opening that your camera lens will be letting in light. The other one is ISO. That's the sensibility of your sensor to light. And the third is shutter speed. Now, all three of those adjustments can change what your photo looks like. So for example, if you want to freeze action, you want a fast shutter speed. If you want to shoot in low light, you have to bring your ISO up to make sure that you get an image where everything is clear. And if you want to play with what is called depth of field, you use the aperture. Aperture is really the ring, that opening that you have at your lens to let in light. The only thing is that as you open an aperture, something called the depth of field changes. And what is depth of field? Depth of field is the degree to which your photo is in focus at different distances from the lens. Therefore, as your opening opens up, you'll have less stuff in focus from the lens to the subject. So for the example of Laurence right here, her eyes are in focus, but not far behind her. She is blurry, and it's blurry also in the background, which makes a beautiful portrait. So the only thing I think I can tell you guys is to aim for one thing, is to have an opening on your aperture that's very, very open. Now remember that when you're talking about aperture, you always talk about a low number to have an open aperture and a high number to have a closed aperture. The more closed your aperture, the more everything is in focus. In the case of Laurence right here, if I had an aperture of, for example, f22, the background in the back would be nice and sharp, and she would be sharp as well. But when you open up your aperture, you get that blurry effect in the background. You get what is called shallow depth of field. So if you want to get that shallow depth of field, you have to prioritize one thing, and it's your f-stop. Now you want to make sure that that f-stop is low, keeping it low, like at 2.8, 1.4, 1.8, and even in the case of the photo you're looking at right now, 1. So prioritize your aperture, get it nice and wide, then play with shutter speed and film sensitivity, ISO, so that you can get a nice shot. But you definitely have to think of getting a low aperture number, which means a wide aperture and lens opening. Sounds simple, but there are quite a few challenges that can occur. In the case of the photo you're looking at right now, it was done on a cloudy day. Therefore, there was not a ton of light out there, so I could open up. But the challenge is when you start opening up your aperture is that you're letting in a lot of light. Had I taken this shot on a very sunny day, I would have had a lot of problems because I would open up my aperture to make sure that I got the shallow depth of field. But by doing that, I'm letting in a lot more light. And if I let in a lot more light, then I have to have a shutter speed that's very fast to make sure not a lot of light gets in, and a sensitivity on my ISO that is not as sensitive. Sometimes there can be so much sun that you cannot get your shot and get the low depth of field. In this case, we introduce what is called an ND filter. It's a neutral density filter. I'm not going to get into the details of what it does, but it's very, very simple. It's basically like putting sunglasses on your camera. What you do is you bring the light levels down of what is coming into the lens in a neutral way, meaning that all light levels and all different light colors are brought down evenly. Therefore, you can open up your aperture, you can slow down your shutter speed a tiny bit, and you can get ISO sensitivity that's a bit high. So there are no mysteries on how to get bokeh. Bokeh is very simple. When you have a camera, you have to get shallow depth of field, meaning you have to get an f-stop, which is low, which also means an opening, which is wide. That's it. There's no other way. That's the way you're going to get these type of shots. It gives you a nice sharp image where you do focus, but everything else is blurred out. Now, you play with that number, the f-stop, at f1.8, f2.8, f4, to decide how much you want to have it blurred in the back. It can be nice to have a hint of what's in the background, so you might want to play with that. So whenever you want to get bokeh and you want to get a different level of bokeh, play with your different levels of lens opening, meaning your aperture. Learning about bokeh is quite cool, but you can learn even more about tons of other photography concepts and different styles of photography. And that's why I want to talk to you guys about my sponsor, Skillshare.
Although GGP is all about getting great photo results, it's mostly about the journey. And speaking of journeys, Skillshare is a learning community where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. They've got tons of classes for the creative and curious on a whole slew of topics, letting you discover illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. I personally learned a whole ton about street photography, artistic photography, and filmmaking. Skillshare is an online learning platform that is easy and effortless to use and offers you way more than you thought. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of the premium membership so you can explore your creativity. So make sure to click the link in this video description to unlock your passions through discovery and learning with Skillshare.
I hope that helps you guys in doing what you got to do. You guys stay tuned, like, share, subscribe, and don't forget, everybody, keep on making something from nothing.